Hallo Deutschlerner! In this lesson, I will teach you how to use the inseparable prefix verbs in German. I explain when not to separate a prefix from the verb, and I'll show you a list of inseparable prefixes. You will also learn how these inseparable prefixes work and how to use a variety of inseparable verbs in German through a ton of example sentences. You will also see how these inseparable prefixes change the meaning of the verbs. To skip to a particular verb prefix, look to the timestamps down below. This video is the first of a series of videos about prefixes added to German verbs. This will be the only video about inseparable verbs. In the next several videos, I'll explain how to use separable verbs, which prefixes are separable, and how each prefix changes the meaning of the verbs. Once I have those videos made, they will be linked down in the description. This video is sponsored by viewers like you. If you want to be awesome like these people and support this YouTube channel, you can do so via the link down below where it says join. There you can become a channel member on this YouTube channel. Or if you prefer, you can go to patreon.com/Mr. L. Antrim. By becoming either a channel member or a supporter on Patreon, you get access to worksheets, MP3 downloads, and more. First of all, let's talk about prefixes in general. German verbs are often modified with prefixes. They change the meaning and morph one verb into another. For example, the verb geben is often translated as to give, but when you add the prefix aus, we translate it with the English verb to spend. While this does more accurately represent the usage of the verb ausgeben, you can also translate it as to give out. This tells us the prefix aus changes the direction of geben from a more general, non-specific away from the subject to a more outward direction. Basically, every verb in German has a direction of sorts. The direction of lernen, for instance, is from less to more. The direction of leben is forwards, or forwards in time. The direction of singen is from your mouth away. These directions are changed by the prefixes. Most prefixes, like aus, are separable. This means that the prefix is often removed and put at the end of the sentence. For example, Ich gebe 20 Euro für das Konzert aus. I am spending 20 euros for the concert. Some prefixes are inseparable. This means that they modify the meaning of the verb, but they stay attached instead of being moved to the end of the sentence. For example, kommen means to come, but bekommen means to receive. Although these prefixes don't get removed, you should still be aware of them because they won't take the ge prefix that is added in the perfect tense, while the separable verbs will. The list of inseparable prefixes is relatively short. They are be, ent, emp, ge, miss, ver, and zer. Now that we know what they look like and have a general idea of their purpose, let's talk about the rules. As I mentioned, inseparable prefixes are the easy ones. They simply act like normal verbs. You may recognize the base of the verb, but the meaning has changed due to the prefix. In the present, Präsens, future, Futur 1, or simple past, Präteritum tenses, you simply treat them like normal verbs. If the non-prefixed version is irregular in the present or past, the prefixed version is irregular in the same way in the same tenses. When you use a verb with an inseparable prefix in the perfect tense, or any tense based on the perfect tense, the pluperfect, the plusquamperfekt, or the future perfect, Futur 2, you don't add the ge at the beginning of the past participle to those verbs. Beantworten, for instance, is beantwortet in the perfect. Antworten, conversely, is geantwortet. Bedanken just becomes bedankt, while danken becomes gedankt. Bekommen stays the same and becomes bekommen, instead of kommen becoming gekommen. Bedeuten changes to bedeutet. You get the idea. This is why in my German 2 classes we have a saying, if you have a BE, you don't need a GE. This is mostly due to the fact that the only inseparable prefix that their textbook seems to care about is BE, found at the beginning of words like bekommen, to receive, bedanken, to thank, bearbeiten, to edit, beantworten, to answer, and so on. Obviously, this rule applies to all of the inseparable prefixes, but is particularly helpful for verbs that aren't usually seen as having a prefix at all. Beginnen, for instance, to begin, or begegnen, to meet. because there's no such thing as ginnen or gegnen, but beginnen and begegnen are both treated as if the be at the beginning is simply an inseparable prefix. The only other thing that's special about inseparable prefixes is that the emphasis in the pronunciation is on the main part of the verb and not the prefixes. So it's beantworten, bedanken, bekommen, and so on, not beantworten, bedanken, bekommen. You get what I mean? That's it. There's really only one special rule for inseparable prefixes, and if you're just starting to learn German, this probably won't affect anything that you're trying to say, because you're not saying things in the past tense yet. Obviously, you'll eventually need this rule, so that's why I mentioned it. Each prefix changes the verb in a very distinct way. Now that you know the rules for using the inseparable prefix verbs, I'll show you each of the inseparable prefixes and explain what they do to the meaning of the verb. First up, we have be or b. This prefix generally does stuff that involves direct objects or the transitivity of a verb. In other words, sometimes it makes a verb that didn't used to be able to take a direct accusative object, make it so that it takes a direct object. This happens with verbs like antworten and beantworten. Both mean to answer, which is sometimes confusing for German learners. Antworten is used to answer people, and that person is indicated in the dative case. This is sort of an implied direct object of the question, but there's no real direct object to speak of. Beantworten, by contrast, is used to directly answer questions, letters, and the like. For example, antworten, to answer. Antwortet mir nicht. He doesn't answer me. Beantworten, to answer. Beantwortet die Frage nicht. He doesn't answer the question. The same is true for the difference between zaubern, to do magic or conjure up, and bezaubern, to enchant. Die Hexe zaubert einen Besen. The witch conjures up a broom. Die Hexe bezaubert den Besen. The witch enchants a broom. In the first one, the witch created a broom, probably out of thin air or out of nothing. In the second one, there is already a broom there and she enchants it, as in the movie The Sword and the Stone, Die Hexe und der Zauberer, or Fantasia. Sometimes the prefix be shifts the action onto the object or changes it from one object to another. For example, the verb kommen means to come. This indicates that the subject is going in the direction of a destination. If you add be to this verb, it becomes bekommen, which means to receive. This moved the action from the person going somewhere to the object moving and the person being stationary. Here it is in action. Ich komme 3 Uhr. I am coming at 3 o'clock. Ich habe deine E-Mail bekommen. I received your email. Here's another example of this happening with a be verb. Achten, to respect or esteem. Du solltest deinen Vater achten. You should respect or esteem your father. Beachten, to pay attention to or heed. Du solltest die Regeln beachten. You should heed or pay attention to or respect the rules. The be prefix is easily one of the most used inseparable prefixes. One website that I read said approximately 25% of inseparable prefix verbs are made with the be prefix. That being said, I don't know where they get their numbers, so take these percentages with a grain of salt. On screen now, you can see a list of some popular verbs with this prefix. Just wait while that scrolls for a little bit, because it's kind of a long list. So, by the way, if you want to get one of these lists, I've made it available on my website. So you just go to germanwithantrim.com/shop and you'll find it in the free stuff. So you can download all of the PDF versions of all of these lists of different verbs that'll be up on the screen. Is that thing still going? Wow, there really are a lot of verbs that take this prefix. I mean, like a lot of them. Now, if you're just starting to learn verbs with this prefix, you should probably just start with this list because these are the most popular ones. The big list that I showed you before is not actually my own list, but came from Wiktionary.org. Personally, I would start with this little list first, and then you can kind of move on to the more difficult ones later. If you want to practice the verbs that are on the big list or on the small list, I've linked down in the description where you can find Quizlet lists for both the small list and the long list versions of each of the prefixes. Next up, we have ent. This prefix is relatively popular too. That website that I mentioned just a minute ago says that about 15% of all inseparable prefix verbs start with ent. It has a general meaning of removing something, but is often translated with the prefixes un, di, or dis in English. My personal favorite of these verbs doesn't follow this convention, however. The verb enthaupten means to behead. There is the option to translate it as decapitate, which would mean that it follows one of the aforementioned prefixes in English. There is no verb haupten, but there is the noun haupt, which refers to the main part of something. In this case, we have ent in front, which means that it literally is to remove the main part. Der Henker enthauptet den Verbrecher. The executioner beheads or decapitates the criminal. There are some less disturbing examples of this prefix, obviously. For example, the verb laden means to load. Add in ent and it means to unload. Decken means to cover, while entdecken means to discover or uncover. Here they are in action. Die Bibliothekarin lädt die Bücher in den Wagen. The librarian loads the books into the cart. Die Bibliothekarin entlädt die Bücher vom Wagen. The librarian unloads the books from the cart. Das Kind deckt den Tisch. The child sets the table, or covers the table with the required items. Das Kind entdeckt Kaugummi unter seinem Schreibtisch. The child discovers gum under his desk. A very popular verb in this category is entfernen, which means to remove. The base is fern, which isn't a verb, but an adjective or adverb that means far. So this is like removing something far away from where it was. For example, Ich weiß nicht, wie man diese Malware entfernen kann. I don't know how one can remove this malware. One that I just think is cool because of the way that it works is entfärben, to bleach or discolor. There's the verb färben, which means to dye or color. Adding ent makes it so that you remove the coloring that was added through the verb färben. Ich färbe meine Schuhe grün. I am dyeing or coloring my shoes green. Mami, du hast meine Hose entfärbt. Mom, you discolored my pants. You get the idea. Ent makes some sort of removal action with the verb. You could also think of this as a reversal of the action that happened without ent. Here's a big list of verbs that use this prefix. Ooh, ah, hey, check that one out. Look at that list. It's a super swell list, isn't it? Oh boy, the list of verbs. Next up is emp. This is basically just a variant of ent, but it's only used with these three verbs and verbs that are derived from them. Empfangen, to receive. Empfehlen, to recommend. Empfinden, to feel or sense. Ich habe keine Nachrichten empfangen. I haven't received any phone notifications. Der Kellner empfiehlt den Rinderbraten. The waiter recommends the roast beef. Wir empfinden eine große Verantwortung für die heutigen Probleme. We feel a great responsibility for the problems of today. Next up is er. This prefix is another pretty popular one. That website that I keep mentioning says that it makes up 10% of all inseparable prefix verbs. It can be used to initiate the action of the verb. For example, lernen means to learn, but erlernen is usually translated as to master. It can also be translated as to learn, however, which makes it a bit confusing. This verb is different than lernen in that with lernen, you are adding to your knowledge and the previous level of knowledge is not known. With erlernen, we know that you had no prior knowledge about the subject and the learning process has begun with the sentence that you are saying. Ich lerne Deutsch. I am learning German. We don't know how much German I knew before that sentence, but we know that the knowledge has increased since this sentence has been said. Ich erlerne Deutsch. I am acquiring or learning German. We can tell with the prefix er that I didn't previously have any knowledge of the language, but I am initiating that learning process with this sentence. A strange but colorful example of this is trinken, which means to drink, and ertrinken, which means to drown. Trinkt Wasser. He is drinking water. Ist im Wackelpudding ertrunken. He drowned in pudding. You can create a verb from an adjective using If possible, the verb will add an umlaut to the base of the verb when you do this. For example, the adjective niedrig means low. When you add the prefix er and the requisite en at the end to make it into a verb, it becomes erniedrigen, which is to humiliate, literally to make someone low. As I mentioned before, er initiates the action of the verb, so that means that this verb is literally starting to take someone low. Der Muttersprachler erniedrigt den Lehrer, indem jede Kleinigkeit korrigiert. The native speaker humiliates the teacher by correcting every little thing. Another example of this is often used on worksheets. The adjective ganz means whole. The verb version, ergänzen, means to complete or make whole. Notice that there's an umlaut in there like I said before. Again, we are initiating the action of making something whole with this verb. For example, ergänze die folgenden Sätze. Complete the following sentences. And here's the obligatory list of verbs that use the prefix er or er. Next up is ge or g, which is by far my least favorite prefix because the meaning seems to be completely arbitrary. It's like the Germans ran out of prefixes to use, so they just threw all of the other verbs into this category. Luckily, this isn't nearly as popular as some of the other prefixes, which have more definite meanings. Denken and gedenken are worse. Check out these examples. Ich denke an deine Mutter. I am thinking about your mother. Ich habe oft an deine Mutter gedacht. I have thought about your mother often. Mit dieser Tafel gedenken wir den Soldaten. With this plaque, we are commemorating the soldiers. Mit dieser Tafel haben wir den Soldaten gedacht. With this plaque, we commemorated the soldiers. This time, there is literally no difference between the past participle of gedenken and the past participle of denken. You can tell based on the use and the context, but still, it's bothersome. Basically what I'm saying is you need to be careful with the verbs with the prefix ge, as they often have non-prefixed versions that share scary similarities to the prefixed versions. As I mentioned before, the ge prefix is not nearly as popular as some of the other ones on our list for today, so the prefix list for this one is relatively short. Next up is miss. Unlike ge, miss is super easy to use. It's pretty much the same as the English prefix miss. It indicates that something went awry, it didn't go as planned, something is bad. For example, achten means to respect or regard, but missachten means to disregard or disobey. Wir achten das Gesetz. We respect the law. Hat die Warnung missachtet. He disregarded the warning. Trauen is to trust, but misstrauen is to mistrust. Ich traue ihm nicht. I don't trust him. Ich misstraue ihm. I mistrust him. A fun one is missverstehen. It has two prefixes, miss and ver. Both of them are inseparable. Stehen means to stand. Verstehen means to understand. Missverstehen means to misunderstand. Elmo steht in der Ecke. Elmo is standing in the corner. Elmo versteht den Mann. Elmo understands the man. Elmo missversteht den Mann. Elmo misunderstands the man. The list for this prefix is relatively short as well. Next up is ver. There are a ton of verbs that start with ver. This is partially due to the fact that this prefix is relatively flexible with its meaning. There are several categories into which one can classify the verbs with the prefix ver, but they all have one overarching idea. The prefix ver changes the direction of the verb. It doesn't point it in a particular direction, it simply means that it isn't the direction that the verb went prior to the prefix ver being applied. The actual direction is expressed through the rest of the sentence. The first category that most people mention is the concept of completing or going away. The verb laufen means to run or walk, or at the very least to go on foot. Generally, there is a direction or a destination in mind when laufen takes place. When you add ver, you get verlaufen, which translates as to get lost. It literally is going somewhere, but you don't end up where you wanted to go. You could think of it as indicating that something is going to excess or in a bad way. If you want to point the direction of a verb with ver in a particular direction, you need to do that with a bit more information in the sentence to give that context, as the verb and the prefix combination on their own can't do that. Ich laufe zum Bahnhof. I am running to the train station. The destination is clear and I have purposefully reached this destination. Ich verlaufe mich zum Bahnhof. I lose myself to the train station. In this sentence, verlaufen is not going straight to the train station. The subject is lost or getting lost, but still arrives at the train station even though they got lost, or because they got lost. Hungern is translated as to hunger, but verhungern is to starve, literally to hunger to excess. Du wirst nicht mehr hungern oder dursten. You will no longer hunger or thirst. Ich muss frühstücken, sonst werde ich verhungern. I need to eat breakfast, otherwise I will starve. Jagen is to hunt, but verjagen is to chase away. Der Eiskönig jagt den Drachen. The Ice King hunts the dragon. Der Drachen verjagt die Schafe. The dragon chases away the sheep. I've mentioned achten a couple of times now. When you add ver, you get to despise. You regard them in the wrong direction. Mein Hund verachtet Eichhörnchen. My dog despises squirrels. It can also imbue a verb with an attribute by changing a noun or adjective into a verb. Vereinfachen, for example, means to make simple, as the word einfach just means simple. Sollte ich diese Arbeit vereinfachen? Should I make this work easier? You can make things into stone by using the verb versteinern, which comes from the word Stein or stone. Nach ein paar Millionen Jahren versteinern die Bäume. After a few million years, the trees turn to stone or petrify. You can also do this with slightly less literal verbs like verkörpern, to embody, which comes from the noun der Körper, the body. Diese Schlange verkörpert keine Gefahr. This snake represents or embodies no danger. As I mentioned earlier, this is one of the most popular inseparable prefixes in the German language. That website that I keep mentioning says that they make up 45% of all inseparable verbs in the German language. But this is the one that makes me question their numbers, as I found fewer verbs with ver than just er. At any rate, here is a giant list of verbs that use ver or ver as their prefix. The last prefix for today is zer. This prefix is used to destroy things or break them into pieces. I mean that literally. Words like stören, to bother or disturb, changes to zerstören, to destroy. Literally, that would be to bother or disturb to pieces. Here is an example. Bitte stör mich nicht, während ich arbeite. Please don't disturb me while I am working. Ein Feuer hat den Wald zerstört. A fire destroyed the forest. It doesn't have to be this drastic, however, as the verb teilen means to divide, but zerteilen means to cut up or cut off. Seine Mutter teilt den Kuchen. His mother divides or shares the cake. Die Mauer hat Berliner 28 Jahre zerteilt. The wall cut off the Berliners for 28 years. Of course, there are a lot of terrible verbs on this list because they all mean to destroy something, but by means of the main part of the verb. For example, der Hund hat mich gebissen. The dog bit me. Das Schnabeltier hat meinen Finger zerbissen. The platypus chewed up my finger. Der Junge pflückt ein paar Blumen. The boy picks a few flowers. Der Junge zerpflückt ein paar Blumen. The boy picks a few flowers apart. Here is the last big list of verbs for the day. If you want to learn more about these prefixes or the separable prefixes, I've made a playlist linked over here for that. If you want to practice what you've learned in this video, you can find worksheets and answer keys on my website linked in the description. Das ist alles für heute. Danke fürs Zuschauen. Bis zum nächsten Mal. Tschüss!